Earlier in the week, we launched the Doordarshan Prime Band with a debate on state of the media and the role of a public broadcaster. It was attended by 6 prominent experts and decision makers on the media. Our viewers said that they enjoyed it. So for those of you who missed it, here it is again. Well, as questions are raised over the direction of the Indian media, but primarily TV channels, but also newspapers which have allegedly run news paid for by vested interests, we at Doordarshan believe that beyond the finger pointing, it's time to ask, what can we public service broadcasters do to make things better? Well, we've got an eminent panel to discuss that this evening. Joining us on Doordarshan Live, Manish Tewari, Minister for Information and Broadcasting. Thank you for being with us. Jay Panda, Member of Parliament from Kendrapada in Odisha. Sevanthi Nainan, eminent media commentator. We've got Sitaram Yechuri, Rajya Sabha Member of Parliament and Politburo Member of this Communist Party of India, Marxist. Rajiv Pratap Rudy, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha and spokesperson for the BJP. And Sanjeev Srivastav, who is of course the editor of the Prime Band. Let me start with you, Manish. Some of the pressure that comes on the government, not just your government, but earlier as we saw with the BJP NDA government as well, comes from some of the tone and tenor of the reporting of the private channels. Is there a belief now that the private channels have become so shrill that you need to strengthen the public service broadcaster?
Well, I don't think it's a question of either or. There is a need to strengthen the public broadcaster for different reasons altogether. Insofar as the shrillness in our public debate or the public discourse is concerned, that's something which needs to be deliberated with a lot of responsibility. And the reason why I say that is that while a free media is essential for a healthy democracy, but there comes a time when you need to really discuss as to where do you draw the line. Shrillness should not become corrosive, that it really becomes an impediment upon the growth trajectory of the country per se. So therefore, while all of us and most of us have been appearing regularly on private news channels, we have been a part of the noise and the cacophony, but notwithstanding that, there is a need, to see that if the public broadcaster can evolve into a golden mean, around which people, depending upon their ideological predilections or on the basis of which they would like to formulate their news agenda, can really evolve.
Jayapanda, you come from a part of the country that is, well, some way out from the Hindi heartland, the political center, if I may call it that. What do people want from a public service broadcaster?
I think people in Odisha and Kendrapada want the same of our public service broadcaster as people all over India, but also all over the world. Public service broadcasting exists in many countries. There are at least 30 prominent ones across the world. The best known ones being the BBC of the UK and the PBS, the Public Broadcasting Service of the US. And the function of the public broadcaster everywhere is to be impartial, is to be credible, and is to be run professionally without hankering always after the TRPs. Now, this is made possible because of public funding, because if you are only based on market-based funding, advertising and so on and so forth, then obviously there is a competitive pressure to the bottom, as it were, and that breeds a degree of shrillness that needs to be balanced by public service broadcasting. The problem is that Doordarshan over these decades has gained and lost many things, but one thing it has never had is credibility. And for that, you need more than public funding. You need an arm's length distance from government. The BBC, for instance, is run by a trust. And unless you can have that, see, today I welcome this discussion that's happening. You've got a minister who's supportive of this. I believe there's a task force under Sam Pitroda which is evaluating this very question as to the role of Prasar Bharati.
Well, it is happening.
But the point is, these are welcome moves, even though they are overdue. But people can change. So we need to have in place a systemic change that will survive changes in personnel, and that is something that needs to be evolved if we are to have a credible public broadcasting.
Sevanthi, you heard the point about funding and independence and autonomy and so on. The problem is that in the way that we've restructured Prasar Bharti, we've made Doordarshan responsible for part of its funding, at least on advertising revenue. Now that, as you rightly pointed out in many articles, creates a series of linkages and pressures that have to do with ratings, and therefore you are bound to audience approval, which is not good.
No, audience, first of all, I'm not, I'd like to say that credibility is not the only thing that your many audiences, particularly in the rural parts of the country, are hung up on. They just want information, and they want it from a better looking, brighter channel. They want a lot of agricultural information. In fact, the people who are on private DTH platforms who plug out and plug into Doordarshan when the Kisan programs come on. They want much more news than Doordarshan gives. They're not even hung up on credibility there. They just want more news. So there are lots of other demands. And the point is that if you're doing agriculture and education and health and all of that, you're not necessarily going to make it commercially viable, but it's your job to do it.
But Doordarshan and many of the other private channels are giving a lot of news. The question is the tone and tenor of the news.
Doordarshan is not giving as much as they're giving in terms of time spent also. At least that's what people say.
Right. Sitaram Yechury, the left claims to speak for the downtrodden.
We don't claim, we do.
Well, from your perspective, what would you like to see from Doordarshan?
Well, you see, I'm very glad that we have restarted this debate. It's been nearly a decade. The first round of debate led to the formation of the Prasar Bharti Trust. So it was a trust. Later, we went through various hiccups. Finally, you had an independent body and board. But why are things not working out? The need for the public broadcaster is something which I would take as a given. Because there is a need not merely to really reflect what are the actual concerns of the people, not merely to create a consciousness among the people about our nation and our country, but also to inform the world of how India sees various developments, and which is a very important aspect. Now, it's only the public broadcaster who can do this job.
You're talking about strategic communication here.
Yeah, strategic communication and information. And remember, India has a very, very large diaspora. I mean, where people are interested to know what is happening back home, what is India thinking about, let's say, some developments in the Middle East, what is its, the various things that they want to be informed about. Now, the question is, there is an issue of credibility, but that is not all. The issue is the effectiveness of independent public broadcasters has always been when they are not answerable to a government. In India, you created the trust, but the funding of the trust comes from Mr. Manish Tewari's ministry. Now, it has to be independent of the ministry. It has to be directly under parliamentary supervision and accountability.
As well as the appointment of officials.
No, that you create a system. You create a system where these appointments take place, and we have such systems in our country. You have the Union Public Service Commission, you have various other systems that you have, but it's not government controlled in terms, and that is very important. If you separate the funding
we'll come and talk specifically about this funding.
And then it would be accountable to the Parliament, because the Parliament funds it from the Consolidated Fund of India.
We'll talk specifically about the funding, but Rajiv Prasad Puri, in a very polarized political atmosphere, where people almost reflexively oppose what the other side is saying, would you say that there's a certain appetite within the BJP to support this reform of Prasar Bharti, public service broadcasting, Doordarshan?
What you want is a public broadcaster carrying issues of education, health,
people's concern. Then you decide that mandate and say, this is what I want and this is the model which I want. What Doordarshan or this broadcaster has been doing is trying to compete with the rest of the channels. So like Manish is 800 channels and you are one of them. So if you have that positioning, you have to decide whether you want to compete with the world and establish yourself, or you want to be a dedicated channel for a public broadcast. It's like Air India, which will survive because the government wants to run it and the officers and others and bureaucrats and politicians have to travel. So this would be also continuing because we want it, because you will have a CEO in Air India as an IAS officer. There are no merit across. So you have a CEO in Prasar Bharti as an IAS officer. So if you have a mentality to continue like this, no one can stop. Retired, as I would say.
Maybe retired.
Sanjeev, I'm going to come to you with a very important question.
But selected, let me qualify that. Selected by a committee which is headed by the Vice President of India, who's also the chairperson of the Council of States, the house that both of you honourable members belong to.
We can have.
Sanjeev, I'm going to come to you with the question that has been raised by speaker after speaker, and that is the question of funding. Who should fund and run India's public broadcasting organization? It's a very big issue. Sanjeev, you've been with the BBC. That's a particular model over there. Would you say that would work here?
See, the funding in all public service broadcasters is from the state. Now, whether it is from the government, INB ministry as it's happening right now, or whether it's from a parliamentary, consolidated fund of India, that would, yes, make a difference. But in the end, even that, largely whoever is having more majority, they have a handle on that kind of purse as well. So we cannot forget that fact. I think the bigger question really is that how much of a political will and consensus is there on an issue that we are in the serious business of nation building, and a public service broadcaster is a vital cog in that overall picture. You somewhere strike that space between the sensation or sansani and the susti which sometimes public service broadcaster in India especially gets associated with. If you strike that middle path, balance is the key. So for a multicultural, multi-ethnic society like ours, it makes even a stronger case for a public service broadcaster than perhaps any other country in the world.
Manish Tewari, as Minister of Information and Broadcasting, you're never going to get approval. That's a given. But this initiative, this whole business of trying to keep autonomy at the same time to try and support an organization so that it can fulfill the many things that Sanjeev just spoke about, is there an inherent dichotomy in all of this?
Well, I don't know whether there's a dichotomy or not. That's what the Sam Petroda committee is mandated to look at, and I don't think it'll be appropriate on my part to really second guess those deliberations.
But going by the record of committees in the past.
But having said that, I think that in addition to the education, health and the developmental mandate which a public service broadcaster essentially should have, there is also another mandate. And the mandate is that when you have such a diverse broadcasting space, who can become the golden mean around which people, as I said earlier, depending upon what their news agenda is, can really revolve. And the reason why I say that is because healthy debate is important for a democracy. But a corrosive debate can also spell the death knell of democracy.
You've made that point, and I don't think anybody disagrees with you.
So therefore, now coming back to the funding issue, see, I have no difficulty at all that tomorrow, if let's say Parliament in its wisdom was to decide that the funding should come out of the Consolidated Fund of India, and government should have the same relationship with the public broadcaster as maybe the Ministry of Finance has with the C&AG. I don't think that we fundamentally have a problem with that. But there is also an equally strong view on the other side. And the strong view is that since you have 852 broadcasters, the entire perspective when Prasar Bharti was set up was different. So therefore, when government spends thousands of crores on developmental imperatives, should it not really have a disseminating arm? So there are equally strong arguments on both sides.
No, that is not a public broadcaster. That is not a public
broadcaster. Which goes to the root of the argument whether you require a public broadcaster or not.
Government's that's what it's going to be.
I think if Manish really means what he said about him not having a problem if the government had the same kind of relationship to Prasar Bharati as it has to the C&AG, I think there's a very bright future for Prasar Bharti. Because the point is, I think the essential principle has to be, no matter how you come up with the funding, and you can have different formulas. For example, the BBC formula is that every television viewer in the UK pays a service tax. The PBS model in the US is quite different. The government allocates.
It's got a big donation also.
From something, yes, they have charitable donations also, but the government actually allocates from something similar to the Consolidated Fund, but then thereafter has no role in directing what it should cover, whom it should cover, etc., etc. So I think formulas can be figured out if the government is serious and if the rest of us are serious in Parliament to make it happen. But I think there are two things that are crucial. If you look at the successful public broadcasters throughout the world, whether it is BBC or whether it's Al Jazeera, for instance, or any of the others, you'll find two things that are common among all of them. They all are treated as credible. They may not have the TRPs of the other private news channels, but they are balanced, they go to the depth of the issue.
Does that come from an internally imposed culture of excellence, or something that's imposed from
Well,
outside?
the mandate has to be there, the charter for it. The charter has to spell out that it is independent and it has a mandate. But then, of course, the internal...
You can be independent and still completely useless.
I understand. But there's the second point. The first is credibility, and that's why I keep on emphasizing that it is important, and this is where Doordarshan suffers vis-a-vis the others. But the second thing that is equally crucial is that it should not be shy of quoting controversy. Now, the BBC or the Al Jazeera do not hesitate in taking up very controversial subjects, even if it embarrasses the government of the country.
Even if it embarrasses themselves.
Can I simplify it? Can I simplify it? What he's wanting to say, you put all documentaries on Doordarshan, agriculture, education, all that. But can Doordarshan think of becoming a news portal where, without thinking that if I put this news maybe on maybe something which is absolutely affecting the government, the first news and the breaking news comes from Doordarshan? Tell me in last 5 years or 10 years.
It's not happened.
It will not happen.
No.
Because the person who is going to put that news in this will think, what will Manish say? What will the Prime Minister's office say? That will always be haunting them. The day they can break out to say, this is the first news of the day and the biggest controversy of the government, I am going to put it the first channel.
Very honestly, not a news night.
Can I just...
But the day you do it, your credibility, you would be the last. No, sir. You have the largest reach. Then you show all what you want.
Can I just say one thing?
Rudy, that is possible. That is possible only if you separate the umbilical cord of funding from the government.
Yes. So whatever mechanism.
That is the most important part.
It's my government, your government.
Exactly. Anybody's government. Anybody's government. And the quality, you're talking about the quality. I mean, you can have the autonomy, but you can still be very inefficient and very useless and very boring. The quality, you'll have to give the charter to develop that quality by giving them that independence and autonomy.
The challenge really is, how do we create that culture of professionalism, so therefore it becomes completely independent of whosoever may be the individual.
So if
and funding is an important part of it.
Just one sentence. But just remember, professionals also are not neutral. You can have so don't get into that trap.
That's just the point.
Don't fall into that trap.
They will not dance according to the paymaster's tune. They will dance according to their own convictions.
That is
Sevanti, you're the media expert here.
That's not the point which Sita is making. That professionals do not dance according to their own convictions. Professionals more often, and with all due respects, do also dance to the tune of the paymaster. That's a reality which we cannot ignore.
Sevanti, your view over here. Is it necessary? I mean, it is necessary structurally, but given the fact that reaching there takes a certain tortuous path during which reform is taken slowly, are we never going to be independent in Prasar Bharti organizations until the funding issue is resolved?
Prasar Bharti, even after the funding issue is resolved, already has imbibed this terrific culture of being a government broadcaster for the last 50, 60 years. It's kind of embedded in them. So you have to start from scratch, in my view. I mean, everybody, the way it functions today, the way your kendras function, they're used to a certain culture of functioning. They use, so you have to not just change the anchors and the reporters on top, you have to change everybody, or you have to... They have gone in 2010, all the staff of this broadcaster, and made sure, I mean, the government has obliged them and made sure that they remain government servants. That was their biggest demand. So you have to look at these issues.
One question to everyone. What would be the first and most essential step that we need to take in order to improve the quality of public service broadcasting?
I think the one step which everyone can take to make this organization more relevant, more credible, more trustworthy, more appealing to the new India, if you may, is that for all the eminent panelists, especially those representing different political parties, if they go back with this thought, then they need to really work towards making this an independent organization.
What mechanism you draw to see that people of this country want to watch this national broadcast?
What would be that mechanism?
Now in that case, that level of autonomy must be created, whatever may be the mechanism, that the person sitting on the editorial desk does not think what Manish Tewari will think once I put this news in air. So that mechanism has to be devised.
Breaking news is fine, but I really don't think the BBCs of the world is remembered for breaking news. That's for honest treatment to a news.
Right.
That's what is the role of a public service broadcaster.
I'm not saying about breaking news. A news which possibly is not tailed with others. A news which reaches others.
Yes, I mean, I think Sanjeev has put forward a wish list of saying that if this can happen, that can happen. I mean, this should be done, which is very good, and I agree with him on all the points. But how would you make that possible? You cannot have a
political consensus, he said.
No, not merely political consensus. You see, all of us have been in politics for quite some time. They have run a government. They are running a government.
You have supported many.
Yeah, I have supported many, and we have created many, and and we led to the fall of many. That's all that happened. But the point is that unless you have a structure which is independent of the government of the day, I still insist on my point. The one fundamental change that needs to be done, if you want a public broadcaster worth the name, break the umbilical cord of funding from the government directly.
Manish, the ball is in your court. Everybody is talking about this link or breaking the link between funding and structure.
It requires a consensus to be generated across the board in Parliament, because after all there's a parliamentary enactment which governs the manner in which Prasar Bharti is structured and the manner in which it functions. But in the short run, I think what is most important is Prasar Bharti has a professional board. What we need to do is that we need to make change incrementally, change which can be absorbed by the organization, and we need to stay the course, because let's always remember that change which becomes disruptive is something which you can never see through.
Right.
Change which is incremental, which brownfield organizations can absorb, is the only change which is sustainable.
Incremental change, yeah.
Look, I think the very basic principle that must be established is cut the apron strings but not the purse strings. And once you establish that, everything else can follow from that. Mr. Yechuri made a point about how the UPSC is independent of the government even though it's funded by the government. There are many models. There's the BBC model, there's the Al Jazeera model, there's the PBS model. But all of them essentially have this principle at its core. As far as its relationship to government is concerned, the apron strings are cut, but the purse strings are not cut.
Right. Last word from the media expert.
I think you have to make Prasar Bharti a real programming option. If you do that, people will watch it. Its programs have to be different. They have to cater to the public service broadcasting needs that people have. They have to give a different kind of entertainment. If they're giving it better serials, all of that, a lot of things can be done with it the way it is, with the structures the way it is. It does not have a sharp, different, defined programming edge because it's trying to do what all the others do.
So you're talking about major emphasis
Identity.
on quality and
Different
choosing the
identity,
programs
yeah.
so that you can
who
direct
you're catering
programs
to.
narrowcast to your specific audiences. Well, you've heard the big point, changing of the funding pattern so that Prasar Bharti is more independent, and there is a general consensus that many political parties would support that. You normally hear that from the opposition, but here you're hearing it from the government as well.
And accountable to the Parliament.
And accountable to the Parliament as well. Well, we thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us.